Hello, and thank you for watching. My name is John. Today I'm going to be going over some comments that were left on my video where I went to the Dallas Pride Parade as well as provided analysis of what I thought was going on there and what are the broader implications for society that brings. It is one of my least popular videos. And more than anyone, I received a lot of critiques saying that what I'm saying doesn't make sense. Which, in retrospect, actually does make a lot of sense, because normally with my videos, I script out exactly what I want to see, or excuse me, exactly what I want to convey. And with that one, it was actually a last-minute decision. I wasn't going to make an analysis part of it, but I thought, this is missing some context. There could be more substance here. I could bring a little bit more, and so I just kind of recorded that off the bat. And as a consequence, it didn't turn out that great. And out of all the ones, I really don't like that one, which is surprising because I have lots of videos I don't like. But anyways, I thought it'd be good opportunity to create more content and explain myself a little bit better. Because I am playing in pretty abstract ideas, and so if I don't completely finish my thought and explain the ramifications of what I'm talking about, it can seem like utter nonsense, which makes sense. You know what I mean? I heard once that some ideas are too simple to understand and some ideas are too complex. And the goal is to get right in the middle where it can apply to you, where you can see how it applies into your day-to-day, basically. So, without further ado, let's get to some of these here. Now, this first one, I'm not sure if this is a genuine question. Well, I know it's not a completely genuine question, but it's one of the ones with more substance, and this person has been leaving comments on a couple of my videos, and so I thank them for the care, although I'm not sure what's going on there. But, hi, I watched your most recent video of you confessing a lot of the things that you've done, and I wanted to ask you a question. I know this is going to inherently sound antagonizing to you, but I don't want it. How did you come to the conclusion that letting people express themselves is bad? I'm not going to try to assume anything. I just want to understand. I have an outline of what you think and the reasons for it, but I want to know from your perspective. When you say that these things are satanic, what does that give you? Also, have you ever gone to know someone who is trans as a friend? If you have, what was your thoughts about them? I really don't want to argue with you, but I don't think your opinion on pride and trans people in general is correct. What I mean by that is that I have trans friends who are constantly scared about the anti-trans laws being passed in the U.S. today. As I write this comment, because I want to change your view, or at least widen it. And if I do that, I think you would make the world even just a bit safer for the people I care about. I know I keep repeating, but I don't want to antagonize you or make you feel like you're getting attacked. I know you want to be a good person, so do I. And I think that starts with being open-minded. I want to do this because I recognize the way I used to think about the world, and I see that in you. I could be totally wrong, but by the way you act and seem to think, I don't feel like you have enough love in your life. Your faithfulness to God is inspiring, but right now, in my opinion, I think you're misguided. Go out and meet new people that you don't understand and learn about them. I feel like you would be even happier. If I'm wrong about any of this, feel free to tell me. Thanks for reading. I think there's an assumption there that my opinions are based on ignorance. That I don't know a lot of trans people or I don't meet a lot of gay people. I think I probably, just because of my personality type, I'm very exploratory. I spend a lot of time in very creative circles. I lived in LA for a long period of time. I love dancing, and they have great dancing at gay clubs. So I don't think that your perspective that I believe the things I believe purely out of ignorance is correct. I know I'm an ignorant person. But I don't think I'm particularly ignorant in this regard than you might say, like, the average image of, like, a closed-minded, like, rural conservative person or something like that. I know I was making a lot of those videos out in the middle of like kind of the Texas country, but that was just because of where I was living at the time. Now, there's a lot of questions here. Yeah, I've gotten to know people who are trans, and I would consider them my friend. I don't want to claim that because I know this is a touchy subject for people, and I don't want to be like, oh well, I have trans friends, so I can say this or that. Generally, my perspective is that they're very confused, and that a lot of our generation doesn't really realize that because this is really the first time that this has been explored on a large scale. There's always been a small proportion of gay men who are essentially bottoms, who want to fully fulfill themselves in that identity as part of society. And, I'm not going to say that that's, like, wrong or something like that, but to promote that as, like, the norm or, like, a good pathway for most folks is just overcomplicating people. Look, like, the Pride movement is all about love, okay? The idea that you experience the most sorts of love, the deepest sorts of love, and just purely following, like, lust and the sexual aspect of it is, like, I think everyone knows that's not correct. And so, like, the deepest form of loves that you can have that aren't just, like, maybe, like, you could say, like, a wide form of love, you know what I mean, where you have, like, a lot of different partners and a lot of different sex, even though our society that kind of puts an emphasis on sex, we actually have much less of it, weirdly enough. That's not, that's the shallow part, but there's a deeper aspect to that. And that's the kind of love that you'd actually sacrifice yourself for. And I think, I'm just relying a lot on what older people have told me because I'm ignorant and I don't know. And, we're only alive for a little flash, really, really. And that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of conservative is because I realize that I'm only alive for a flash. But guess what? Humanity hasn't been alive for a flash. Humanity's been, or at least whatever existence has been here since the beginning. And so in the way that I trust that my body is good at moving to point A to point B, I also trust a lot of the inherited cultural traditions that we get because my body is evolved. I honestly am borrowing a lot of principles of evolution when I'm for my reasoning of relying on cultural institutions and traditions and things like that. That being said, like, you're going to have a deeper sense of love with a lifelong partner and kids. No? Like, do people not think that? And do you think that that's actually going to be the most fulfilling way for you to go in life? And like I said, I know there are some people who are men, really, and who most of them are also bisexual, to be honest, but who prefer to be bottoms. And there's good, like, evolutionary reason. It's actually pretty well established to believe that this is the case. And the reason why is because it's, there's all those weird facts that, like, the more older brothers you have, the more likely you are to be gay. Or if you're born in a very stressful situation, you're more likely to be gay. Or, at the time, a lot of violence. It's essentially about establishing a different route of survival that's not just based on combat and offering something else. And saying that, look, you don't have to worry about me as far as a source of resource competition. I'm going to be like your soft partner, like one of the ladies, and fall in with them. And I'm also going to be creative and smart, and that's going to be really nice for you, and all those other sorts of things. Now, I'm actually not sure. A lot of tops, I'm pretty sure, are also more creative, and that's also interesting, but that's probably more to do with having a more plastic mind. And so if you're more plastic, you can learn and fall into things better. And also just maybe if you're because I don't know if you guys know this, but also there's a disproportionate amount of gay people who are really productive and who are, like, lead different fields. And so also could just be, like, some sort of, like, over-obsession with masculinity. I'm not sure if that's true. The example that comes to mind, and I mentioned this in the video, but I didn't really explain it, would be Hoover. Herbert Hoover was a very prominent, now suspected, I shouldn't say this because we don't know this, so just pretend like this is a theory, but you can use this to hypothesize about other situations, because there are some similar situations where you see this thing more for sure. But Hoover, the person who basically founded the FBI, was gay. And, you know, in his house he had a bunch of statues of men, like, wrestling each other and things like that. But you can imagine that if you're in a very, like, technical, obsessed field or something like that, that maybe you just have some sort of, like, overly masculine mind that just, like, prefers that aspect. So, anyways, those are kind of some of my thoughts around that. But generally speaking, for the most folks, as a pathway that's the center, you know what I mean, for most folks to go down, that in that center, you can imagine if you have that tight, it's the center that actually moves society in the future. And that's also obvious because we're also talking about kids, and if you don't have kids, society doesn't expand, you know what I mean, and will, I should say, continue. And I'll address that in a second, why I think that existence continuing is a good thing. I know it's like a base proposition, but I feel like in here you also ask a question about, essentially a question about moral relativism as well. Because you're asking, why is it okay for people, why shouldn't people not express themselves, basically? And that's essentially a question of moral relativism, basically. You know, because saying that, well, I'm just expressing myself, I feel like that's in a lot of ways just saying that, well, I'm going to do what I want, you know, and I don't think people should always do what they want, because I think that there are, the biggest reason, I mean, from your own personal perspective, is that you have lots of wants that actually contradict with each other. And so you actually have to find what is that desire that can bring into harmony all of your other desires. Okay, and that's also what I'm bringing back to that conversation about love. You know what I mean? If you're just after the lust aspect, you're losing out on all the deeper things that you're missing. And that's why I think there's also these examples of all, like, these playboys and things like that who end up being very like sad and lonely in their older life, and you know, that's like, I think, a common image that a lot of people understand. But my general thought is that they're mostly confused. So there's that main category that I just mentioned of bottom transsexual people who are men. That's pretty cross-cultural. So if you have a more conservative society, you still have basically a stable amount of people going through that pathway. So there's precedent for that. The other things that there's lesser precedent for is women deciding to become transsexual, which mostly it's happening amongst young girls, and it's clearly just a psychogenic epidemic. It's like the whole cutting thing. Is that, I mean, if I could explain it on like a more lower level, I mean, it's a social contagion. There's actually, that's going to be a whole topic. If you can watch my video that I made more recently about trans issues and things like that to understand that aspect, and there are plenty of people who can explain it better, like Abigail Schreier or Jordan Peterson, who can do that for you. But and then there are the other category of folks are autogynephiles, and those are basically over masculine men who aren't really in touch with their feminine side or women in general, and so that's their way for their unconscious to explore the opposite side. And so you also see that are men who are straight, who are usually in very masculine jobs and have always been very masculine their whole life, who suddenly, you know, maybe not suddenly, this sometimes happens quite young, but oftentimes it's later in life, decide to start putting on dresses, and it makes them feel like more complete, and then they fall in love with this other half of themselves, and so it becomes no longer a sexual lust, but a deep connection. I mean, because usually when they first start doing it, they will please themselves while they're doing it, and then over time, like you fall in love with another person, you kind of fall in love with your own self, which is why there's actually a very tight overlap between narcissistic personality disorder and this particular version of being transsexual, but also being transsexual in general. And that also has to do with, I think, an overly viewed self-importance. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not like anyone else. I'm an original person. The last thing, and this is like something that just is like, I've been thinking more recently, it's people are getting way too caught up in labels. Like, just because you label something a certain way doesn't mean that it is that thing. Yeah, trans women exist, but to say that trans women are women is just like, you're confusing the label for the actual thing. that's not what it is. You know what I mean? The world actually isn't words. You know what I mean? It's actual real things that fit together, and like, and yeah, we shove things into boxes based off their characteristics. Like, I get that, but they're there's a relationship. One informs the other, and not vice versa. And the idea that if you call some trans woman a woman, that makes us behave differently around them. No, I mean, I've met people before that one day just told me, I have this identity now, and I just told them, like, you're the same person. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, that's fine that you're telling me that, but like, your identity is in the real reality. It's in your behavior. It's in your actions. That's who you are, and you can also derive some comfort from that, because that also means that, you know, when people call you a name, you can kind of just realize that, like, that's a name. You know what I mean? I don't know. Whatever. You know, and that's, I think, actually understanding that is one of the things that makes you understand what God is, because I don't think God is actually about anything like an external reputation. It's the actual real reality that we really don't have access to, and so you actually have to be humble about yourself and everything, and the things that you believe about yourself. But, you know, every thought, everything that you do, even when you're alone, all of that stuff matters. Nothing is inconsequential. The world is an unfolding story, you know, and all of those things are included. How could they not be? So, anyways, that's what I think about that. Now, to address kind of the issue of moral relativism, why it's not okay for people to not express themselves. People are fine to express themselves. How do I say that? Well, I'll say this. Everyone agrees that right and wrong is real, okay? And some people say they don't, you know? But I'll try and give an argument to that. It's my understanding that the world is logical. That means that everything in it fits together. That means everything can fit together in a one coherent unity, okay? And because of that, acknowledging that, there are some tiles that you can place in this unity that don't continue off, that can't incorporate the rest of everything else, and there are some that are able to. And frankly, to kind of get a little meta with this, the tiles that are able to go outwards and keep expanding are also the ones that are willing to change, basically, because we're doing this in ignorance, and you're going to make mistakes. So the stability and the change of being able to bring everything together are both two sides of the same coin. You know what I mean? They both accomplish the same thing, even though those are opposites, change and stability. But there are some ways of creating things that destroy the very foundation that gave the opportunity to put them there in the first place. Okay? And so my morality is basically based on a faith claim, because all morality has to be based on a faith claim because we're ignorant. Doesn't mean that it's not, in some sense, I wouldn't say objective, but in some sense true. It just means that we have to be very humble to it. There are some patterns of behavior, some tiles that destroy the very groundwork of existence. And my morality is based on the claim that existence is good, and existence should continue. And I have some interesting reasons why I think that's also unarguable in a way, because I think that nothing exists in non-existence. I think non-existence actually doesn't exist. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, if you want to serve non-existence, it's like, well, you're serving something that isn't real. Like, non-existence is only something that exists in the head of something existing. I don't know if that follows, but I don't think the objective world, I'm not saying the objective world is anything, but the subjective world is really all that there is, in a way. And the idea that there's an objective world outside of that is, I think, just incorrect, because that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the same way a parallel universe doesn't exist. If it doesn't have anything to do with me or affect anything that I could ever have in contact with, I don't think it exists. You know, and that's kind of like, I feel like part of my training is growing up being largely a radical atheist. Is that, you know, if I can't see it, can't touch it, it's not real. You know what I mean? And that's what I think about non-existence in a way. But anywho, there are some patterns that can further existence and some that destroy the groundwork of it. And we're trying to serve the principles that create the foundation for more and continued existence. So that's a very narrow pathway. I think there's actually only really, in some sense, one way that things can come together, and infinite ways that things can make a mistake. And I partly have faith that, for complex reasons, that the pathway of that is basically following Christ. It's kind of a complicated thing, and I don't think I can fully explain it in this video. Maybe because I don't even fully understand what I mean by that. I just kind of a hunch that that's correct. But yeah. And so I think that putting other desires and principles in the center for an entire month, it's not like a day. You know what I mean? Because this idea of like letting things change and letting the stability like rest so it can come up in a better form. That's what I meant with the idea of death and renewal. And saying that, well, yeah, we have days where we kind of let the rules of society collapse, where, you know what I mean, we forgive people and we kind of restart everything to go into a better transition. And I think that things like Halloween, where we have a night of that, are representative of these things. Halloween is almost like a meta version of, this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but it's okay. The more I talk, the more it'll start making sense, even if it doesn't make sense in this video. Halloween is like a meta sleep in a way. In a way. What they both have in common is basically death. Biblically speaking, and I think literally, when you go to sleep, your entire body becomes loose and becomes like water, and so you can have better communication from the whole thing, and things go into transformation, and you can see insights that were more internal before. And there's something about that strikes me as similar to Halloween. Halloween is all about death, basically. And it also happens basically at the end of the year for everything to restart again. Also in the winter, when it's cold and dark, and then the spring, everything wakes up, is rejuvenated. I think it's in that same pattern of existence, essentially. There's a reason why Halloween, at least, it wouldn't feel right for me if Halloween was in the summer. Maybe because it would be normal then. But I think there's a reason why it's around there. All that's kind of weird and complicated. And I said at the time in that video, and I shouldn't have brought this up, maybe I shouldn't have brought it up now, that it's something I don't really understand that well. But nonetheless, I brought it up. But anyway, it's not like a single day like in Halloween or whatever. It's an entire month. And, you know what I mean, it's on the White House. And it's trying to put something else that doesn't belong in the center of society. And it's basically sexual lust. And, you know, I would say the same thing that if you were putting, doing financial deals inside of the church, which Christ comes in and gets really sad about, having a whole month of worshiping literal pride, and that involves sex. That's what I mean by satanic. And by the way, most people probably don't understand what I mean by satanic. So in the Bible, when right after Peter is told that he's going to be responsible for building the church here on earth, Peter then questions Christ and tells him, no, you can't die, you can't leave us. And the first thing he says is, get behind me, Satan. And so what the satanic pattern is anything that tries to subsume the highest principle. That's why there's the prideful element to it. That's why there's always a prideful element with Satan. You know what I mean? And, you know, I'd also say that, like, cult leaders, someone mentioned cult in the comment, cult leaders are, most of the time, when we think about cult leaders, like the ones we think about on TV, like Manson and stuff, they are people who, like, they believe that they're God. And then they're putting themselves in the center. And they also are using that as a pathway to fulfill their desires of sexual lust. You know what I mean? So they're putting their own self in the highest place, ignoring the actual higher principles. Now, we don't really know the characteristics of God outside of Christ, and outside of the Bible. You know what I mean? And so, that means we have issues being able to fully understand the meaning of what Christ is and the meaning of God and all those things, because we have to accept it in ignorance, because it's very complicated and we're still learning. But nonetheless, I know that putting sexual desire and pride as something that you should advertise as a good pathway for children, and that they should just be their self or whatever, it's not. First of all, it presumes that you know what the self is. I think most people are actually a horde of spirits, in a way. It's pretty rare you meet a person who's like always consistently one person. I mean, you do, but most people are full of contradictions and contradicting motivations and things like that. And in order to get all those things to fit together, there needs to be a principle that conducts which things comes first, and conducts which things need to take a sidestep. You know what I mean? And generally speaking, I don't think that most modern young people understand anything what I'm talking about. That's unfortunate. I mean, I'm not even saying I understand it that well, but I think that's important to know, because, I don't want to have a bunch of people who are old and upset that they kind of spent a lot of their lives chasing idols and false gods and things like that. That doesn't make me happy, and I guess that's all I can say about that. I hope I addressed your question. I think you're a good person. Yeah. My thoughts about them is just, we're all we all are very ignorant, but my thought is that trans people are trying to find salvation in the material world in a way that's defying reality itself. So I don't know, because a lot of that stuff is people thinking that once I get this body, I'll be happy. And I don't think that actual happiness comes from anything material. I don't think I think we all know that too. And this is what I mean, that we have so much conflicting spirits, because, we get fed so much shit that the whole trans ideology has 8 major contradictions baked into the understanding. You know what I mean? About just being yourself, but also you need to have drugs to make you more who yourself is. You know what I mean? Or even the concept that you can be born in the wrong body is just one of the freakiest and confused ideas I've ever heard. You know what I mean? You are your body. You know what I mean? In a very real sense, you are your body. Now, your body has a spirit, but that spirit doesn't have physical characteristics in that sense. It has goals, and those spirits have desires, and they make the matter move or whatever. I know people are like, oh, that's not how, whatever. I can make the argument from either way. You know what I mean? Whatever. I'm so confused. I do not support pride and consider myself a Christian, but this really just seems like an incoherent word salad and you throwing opinions around. You don't talk about what you saw besides nudity, and then again a rant about Christianity, but plays a song that says the F-bomb. I'm confused. What's your message? I think I just answered that question just now, because honestly, if it sounded like word salad, sorry, I would agree I didn't explain myself well enough, although I'm not even sure if I did that just now. Hopefully I did. I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying fuck. Generally speaking, there are situations when I wouldn't do that, particularly who I'm talking to, but that song was funny, and I think that, This might sound crazy, but I think oftentimes the best way to deal with something you think is wrong is to laugh. That could be wrong. That could be incorrect. But, like, you know, I don't know. I don't want to take anything too heavy, you know? There are things to take heavy, but, like, I think that generally my perspective is if I can take something and help people, like, laugh, that's actually, there's something good about that, I guess. One of the things I believe that laughter is the opposite of authoritarianism and tyranny. So maybe if I feel like there are certain things you're not supposed to say or certain people, things you're supposed to do, the best way to critique it is to do it in a way that makes everyone laugh. Now, I'm not sure people thought this video was funny. The best way to try to get at to create something that'll have an emotional resonance with other folks is to just start with something that has an emotional resonance with you. And I was cracking up in my room editing that video. So there's a lot of hidden things in it, if you watch, I think are hilarious. But anyways, you don't have to live in shame and repression. Let everyone project those attitudes on queer people who are just trying to be positive at Pride. I don't agree with your characterization. Most people there are trying to fuck. For real. That's what most everyone there is trying to do. Yeah. Occultists. No wonder this entire video felt like some sort of uncomfortable nonsense propaganda piece made by someone who has zero idea what they're talking about. I'm actually reading Plato right now, and it's actually pretty similar to a lot of what I'm talking about. The pride flag is satanic. Even Christianity teaches you the difference between something being a sin and something being satanic. Okay. Satan's sin was pride. Okay, actually, initially I put this person, I can tell you they put a lot of thought into this, but now I'm reading this and I don't think they did. This is someone who's lost in words and are missing the substance. Satan's sin was pride. How can pride be satanic if pride came before Satan was ever prideful? What? There's not basic logic there. He just says basic logic there, but Satan's sin was pride. How can pride be satanic if pride came before Satan was ever prideful? Genesis doesn't take place in time. Genesis, these stories are timeless. It's not about like order of operations with these things. I'm confused. I'm confused with how that's a point. Satan's sin was pride. How can pride be satanic if pride came before Satan was ever prideful? I'm confused. I don't even understand how that's a point. Sin existed before Satan partook, and pride is simply a sin. I don't know what you are talking about here. I can abide by someone being crazy with their religious propaganda if they understand the religion they're trying to shoehorn into everything, but you don't understand the basics of, okay, this person is actually talking absolute nonsense. Okay, for thinking laughter is so important. You have no idea what comedy even is. You started comparing being gay to a damn sports team. Fact, false equivalency. No, I didn't do that. I said, the point I made is that with a lot of these things, that they are there are subsidiary hierarchies. So you can be the best at something. Everyone can be pretty much the best at something because there are so many things. But even if you're the best at one thing, you should realize that there are people who are better, who are more talented at what they do in something that's actually kind of better. You know what I mean? And so you can be the best person on your local sports team. Means that the people at the NFL level are much better. And I was hypothesizing that while a lot of folks at the local sports team can realize that, although not all of them, that I don't really get a sense of self-awareness when I go to, say, a drag queen show and I see the dancing and it's really bad and everyone's like cheering like it's the best thing that they've ever seen. And it's like, this is just like an overweight guy kind of moving around. You know what I mean? And so that's the point I was making. And so it's making the point that this is like, well, that it's like a kind of a masturbatory, whatever, pride show. I don't think that that's a crazy thing to draw. Why else would I go to a pride show and see a bunch of people who are not that good at dancing for everyone? You know what I mean? Versus if I went to a parade that was devoted towards dancing, everyone would be probably pretty good dancers. You know, it's just not that impressive, and everyone's cheering like it's all awesome. You know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying? There's like no self-awareness that's like, yeah, I don't know. Especially, I should say that the fact that everyone needs to do it naked, which is also funny. You know what I mean? People don't even become so disconnected to the fact that being gay does not have to be about being half naked in public. Those two things just have to be clumped together. And because we understand it's all about pride. Oh, yeah, it's actually about pride. And putting, like, your own immediate desires above something that's actually better. You know? I don't understand how this actually isn't more obvious to people in a way. You know, I know it's not politically correct and we're taught that, like, thinking what I'm saying is, like, the source of all evil or something like that. But, like, maybe some of the things that we were taught only came about very recently and are very destructive. And we just don't know that because we don't read actual people from the past. We don't read things that are timeless. You know what I mean? You seem absolutely tone deaf. The first rule of comedy is know your audience, which you've clearly already failed here. I'm not your audience then, dude. You don't understand comedy or laughter at all. And it's so rich and bizarre to a degree. I wonder how sheltered you actually are. You realize a football player was getting laughed at and ridiculed by a heckler in the nasty way you're insulting. You should have been able to heckle gay people. Wasn't. First of all, I'm not heckling gay people. How do I say this? I'm poking fun at the fact of dancing around naked in public and not being a good dancer. That's not heckling gay people. If you think that's what being gay is, that's kind of a you thing, isn't it? You realize a football player getting laughed at. No, I don't think that people, like... Oh, you're talking about the point where someone makes a comment about, like, you know, not being the best football player and everyone has a strong understanding, like, ha ha ha, whatever. Being able to heckle gay people. They probably get the shit beat out of them. I don't know what that means. That's not even a complete sentence, so I'm gonna keep going. And let's not pretend all you did was go to Pride Parade and quietly record. First of all, if no one on camera gave you dirty looks, why did you leave that footage out if it happened? Because I wasn't filming people. You know what I mean? I was actually trying to focus on filming the parade. I wasn't trying to... The times that I was filming individuals, I was trying to be covert. And... I mean, that's that. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that, like... in a way that was It's mostly like if I'm walking around with the camera. And yeah, I'm not going to turn the camera to someone if they're looking at me weird. I don't think that's that crazy. And honestly, if I'm talking to people, they usually get along with me because people, if they see a person who's not wearing in rainbow colors at the thing, wearing green pants and stuff with a camera, they're probably thinking that like, oh, this guy's a conservative. And then they talk to me and they actually say like, oh, this is actually a person who's like very just open-minded. You know what I mean? And so yeah, because of that, I have weird ideas, and I spend all my time searching ideas, and I have a lot of old ideas. Cool. I doubt you didn't resist your primal urge to spout some Bible quote at some point and talk down attendees. One of these are true, not both. No, none of these are true. How could that not be true? I'm the close-minded one. What are you talking about? No. Yeah, whatever. I don't even think the categories of the flag are even correct. It's a spectrum. No, the categories of the flag include racial minorities. What are we doing? You know what I mean? And honestly, when I'm saying the categories of the flag aren't correct, I'm saying that, like, I don't like the labels of gay and straight because it implies that it's like an identity that's disconnected from the action in a way. You know what I mean? I know people who will say they're bisexual who only had sex with one of the sex, and it's like, I mean, like, sexual attraction is a spectrum. Just because you haven't, like, done that doesn't mean that, like, I don't know. Whatever. I think you get what I'm saying. It's just I hate like the whole strict boxes like that. I find it like, first of all, there's lots of different types of gay people. I don't think there's actually reasonable. I don't think there's a very reasonable distinction between most gay people and bisexual people because most gay people are bisexual. All lesbian women are bisexual. I don't care what you say. Now I know it's actually complicated. I know you're gonna point out individual people who are repulsed by men and stuff like that. But most of the time, most lesbian people, like, women judge men harder as far as attractiveness than men do the reverse. And so there are some women who any man that they would be attracted to doesn't really give them attention for whatever reason. So it's usually like women who are like less physically attractive but are really smart. A lot of those women are lesbian. It's a circumstantial thing, not like a biological thing, you know? And women honestly look for different attributes than guys do that are less associated with looks and things like that. So, like, that's why that's a thing. But generally speaking, the most hardwired group is the group that are bottoms, and even them, it's plastic. So, the whole thing is just like, there's not one thing, you know what I mean? And that's also what I mean by the categories are not correct. I just don't. It's not even that like you can't use those words. It's just that when you invoke those in today's society, the box that most people put on it is like not correct. You know what I mean? And so I don't like the LGBTQIA whole thing in the same way that Jordan Peterson doesn't like saying if he believes in God. It's because like I don't think we're talking about the same thing when we use those words. That's basically it. Pride Month is the worship of pride. No, it's not. Okay, you want to call up my logic. You're saying that Pride Month is not about the worship of pride. Okay. I'm saying things that are completely self-evident. No, it's not. It's called pride. And then why is everyone naked? And that's as much pride as anything to do with anything. No. Someone who, I feel like I'm explaining this to someone who is a 7-year-old, but suppose you sound like a 7-year-old trying to explain what Pride Month is when you clearly have zero idea as well. It all fits. Do some damn research. I was there! Do some damn research. Simple Google search, maybe, minute. See, like, dude, I don't know where these people exist. They exist in a place of words and not a place of reality. Just because Google says something is a definition doesn't mean when I look at it and I see people dancing around naked and fucking all the time that's not and then and like, I'm the most beautiful and elegant person who ever existed, and you must all agree. Like, okay, it's not about pride. I don't even enjoy pride parades. I probably enjoy pride parades more than you folk. Honestly, for the dancing aspect, I don't like the whole. Yeah, I'll just say I'd like it for the whole dancing aspect. I've already explained enough. But I know someone who is brainwashed and not self-aware when I see it. Okay. And holy crap, this guy is like eating a bowl of unsweetened cornflakes in skim milk. Okay. Uninteresting, bland, and you know exactly what you're going to get because all of the other bowls are of the same thing in taste with zero variety. Okay? An honest shame an honest shame that another person who barely understands their own religion, or at least cherry picks it and twists words, is ruining it for decent people who do. Cool. I'm a lesbian. Yeah, I commented here that I can see, I appreciate the sharing. I can see you're being thoughtful. I'm going to delete that tweet because actually he's not being thoughtful. I did barely read it. I just kind of went through and read a couple of things. I was like, okay, at least trying to analyze it. And I was thinking that, well, at least he put a lot of effort into a response, but like saying that he was thoughtful, it's not what being thoughtful is, actually. That's just being very close-minded, honestly. Ironic. I'm lesbian, although from a different country, but still those parades are the same here. I get where you're coming from. Those parades are promoting a culture of degenerates, not love. I just want to live like anyone else, but with a woman. Nothing special. Those parades don't feel like they are for me. And you know what? And that's my general perspective. Like, I understand. Like, being gay is not. I understand it. Like, different people have different lives, and that should, like, be happening. Like, I actually think that's a good thing, because, like, not everything should be the same in a society. You need to have, like, a center, but also the margin. You need to have different perspectives. That's true, But the idea that being gay has to be about, like, that a pride parade, like, I'm wondering, it should be called something else if you want to have a parade about. Maybe I don't even believe in the concept of a pro-gay parade. Except for, like, I'm not saying, like, I think you should have, like, drag shows in the middle of in the night and stuff, and that's, like, all that makes sense to me. You know what I mean? That's like a party where people go, and it's at night, and it's like kind of flipping everything backwards, and it's like, yeah, all that makes sense to me. But having like a thing where it's a whole thing where we celebrate it, and everyone's like, and then the actual of having kids, it's a lot. Yeah, I don't think I just agree with the concept of a pride parade in the first place. It's like that sort of thing. Because I guess it is, in a way, is necessarily possible to take over the sexual element. Although it doesn't have to be so, like licentious and so explicit in a way, Don't know it has to be like that. But, yeah. By the way, so yeah, but, I was talking about how, like, I don't believe in lesbians, I believe in bisexual women, you know what I mean? And I believe that everyone's trying to find their best way to get the most fulfilled sense of love in their life, at least as far as this conversation is concerned. And, yeah, people need to be able to find what that is for them. I think that there's already a baseline path that's a good one. But if for whatever reason that's not your path, that's not your path, And so this, like, very polite, person from a different country, that's good. I'm glad you're in love with someone, you know? Do I think that if you could find, like, a guy that was right for you and you had a whole life, do I just generally think that that would be better? Yeah. And I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that's crazy at all. But, you know, that's what I think about that. Yeah. Anyways, I am glad I made the video, although I would do it differently. And, you know, videos like this that are my spontaneous videos are going to be make a lot less sense because, you know, it's harder to make complete 100% sense unless you're actually writing everything down exactly and making sure that all the equations fit, you know? But I don't think I actually did, I'm not, I don't think the points I made are that insane at all, you know? So, I just, yeah. It's funny, I'm thinking about some of the things people don't understand, like, you know, in a sense I thought talking about death and renewal was an intuitive thing that people understand. I think that was maybe one of the things that started to confuse people the most when I started talking about Halloween, because that was one of the things that I was like, I'm really kind of going off into a territory that I really don't understand, you know what I mean? But, in a sense that should be intuitively obvious to people, that things die so they can be renewed better into a higher order. That's a phoenix. That's when you go to sleep at night. That's the whole seasonal cycle. You know? Things, yeah. Anyways, I hope, I really honestly made this for this one guy who keeps leaving comments on my videos, Zemi. I hope, Zemi is in good, straits, and I hope I was able to finally answer their concerns, because I said 3 months ago that I would, answer their thing. So, anyways, thank you very much for listening to this video, and, do good works today. Do some good works today. You know? That'd be good.